muted everyone in this Zoom room and for our worship service so that we can begin. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to start with our music director, David Chapman, playing Communication Breakdown. The composers are J. Bonham, J.P. Jones, and J. Page, all of Led Zeppelin. David?
Good morning. That was fantastic, David. Welcome to Paint Branch Unitarian Universalist Church. I hope that you're well rested after an extra hour's sleep or perhaps a leisurely breakfast this morning. My name is Polly Pettit, and I'm one of a team of worship associates who works with the minister and the church staff in bringing you worship services. We're happy to be here together, even when it's best that we don't meet in person. We hope that everyone is staying safe in our days of social distancing. Wherever you are on your spiritual journey, wherever your ancestors came from, whatever your race, age, gender, or politics, whatever device you are being piped in on, we're glad that you chose to join this congregation this morning. If you're using Zoom, please run your cursor around the perimeter of your screen to find the microphone icon and be sure to remain muted throughout the service. You may also find the option for switching between gallery view and speaker view. You'll probably want to choose speaker view so that you can clearly see the speakers and the music being performed. Clicking on the bubble icon opens up the chat screen where you can read timely messages from our Assistant Church Administrator, Phil Brown. Right now, I invite you to type into chat how many people are viewing from your screen. Please type 1 if it's just you. If you're new to worshiping here, please post your name and contact information in the chat box so that we can contact you later, since that we cannot greet you in person as we wish we could. At the end of today's service, you'll have 2 options. You may join a small chat group in a small breakout room selected at random, or you may stay in the service for further discussion of Remembering Inherent Worth with Reverend Rachel and me. We have one announcement. There are new entries this week in our 2020 autumn auction catalog. So go to the auction website, which you'll see in the chat bar. And while you're there, consider making an online donation for the paddle race to enhance our online presence. Our next live auction event will be Sunday, November 8th at 4 p.m. And now let us enter into our time of worship. Rachel?
Thank you, Polly. My name is Reverend Rachel Christensen, and welcome to Paint Branch. I'm the minister here at Paint Branch, and I'm glad you decided to join us this morning. I can see the rain is here. It's raining at my house, and it's very gray and kind of chilly. I was saying earlier, we turned on our heat for the first time today because our house was 62 degrees this morning. That seemed worthy of a little heat. And we celebrate the fact that I turn it on and it actually just warms everything up. This is election week, and I think it's heavy on my mind, perhaps I'm sure your mind too. For many of us, we are exhausted from the mental effort about engaging in the election and wondering what's going to happen. I mentioned in the continuum that I'm in touch with other colleagues in the area and ready to be trying to be ready to act or show up if asked to. And this weekend I did get an email inviting us to show up at some of the polling stations in Pennsylvania or Virginia. So I signed up to go to one, and I will be driving up to York, Pennsylvania on Tuesday morning early to be there when the polls open at 7. My role is just to be present, to keep engaged with people in terms of calmness and presence, maybe hand out snacks. So I'll let you know what happens with that. We know that Louise Gluck was named a Nobel Prize winner for her poetry and writing. And she writes this: "It had occurred to me that all human beings are divided into those who wish to move forward and those who wish to go back. Or you could say those who wish to keep moving and those who want to be stopped in their tracks as by the blazing sword." From her book, Faithful and Virtuous Night. We will now have a video of a singer-songwriter, Lee, who will be performing our hymn number 146, Soon the Day Will Arrive. You're welcome to sing along with this recording if you like. Thank you.
Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Some have dreamed, some have died to make a bright tomorrow, and their vision remains in our hearts. Now the torch must be passed with new hope, not in sorrow, and the promise to make a new start. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Share if we care, you and me.
And now Sabrina Jones will light our chalice for us this morning. Sabrina?
Good morning. As I light the chalice this morning, I am reminded that today is also known as All Saints Day, All Souls Day, and El Día de los Muertos. I feel especially connected to my ancestors today. In particular, as I light the chalice, I honor the ancestors who fought and died so that I might exercise my right to vote. I invite you to think about your ancestors and sacrifices they may have made on your behalf. Please join me in reciting the words of our unison chalice lighting. We light the chalice to celebrate Unitarian Universalism. This is the church of the open mind, the helping hands, the loving heart, and the radiant spirit. Encendamos este caliz para celebrar el Unitarismo Universalismo. Esta es la iglesia de la mente abierta, de las manos amigas, del amor del corazón y del espíritu radiante.
Thank you, Sabrina. I want to go back to the video of Lee performing and the wonderful dance breaks that families were doing with their children, and pictures of parents and little ones. Soon the day will arrive when we will be together. Wait and see, wait and see. And the world will be better. So, have you ever found yourself with someone who you think is completely unlike you, that you may have nothing in common with them? Sometimes you even think that this person might be mean or unkind or someone you really ought to stay away from. Kathy Kinnear Hill was a campaign worker in Kansas for the Obama campaign in 2012. She told this story on The Moth, which invites people to tell their story to an audience. President Obama had engaged the campaign workers in a Skype call, and he asked them to leave Kansas and go to Iowa to campaign for him there. And he asked them to just have conversations, conversation after conversation with the people that they met. Kathy is a Black woman who'd worked election campaigns before. She had knocked on countless doors, made phone calls, registered people to vote. And here she was being asked to go to work in Iowa, in rural Iowa. She was teamed up with another Black woman, Rita. Here was Kathy, a middle-aged Black woman, teamed up with Rita, another Black woman who was a little bit older, knocking on doors in rural Iowa. Kathy looked at Rita and said, "Are we really going to do this?" "Oh, yes," said Rita, "let's go." And they did. They walked down farm roads and knocked on doors, talked with people who were cordial, people who shut them down, and went to some houses where people would not even answer the door. One man drove them off with a rifle, and still they walked. Near the end of the day, they got to a farm with a long gravel driveway, and they were met midway up the driveway by the farmer. He said, "I see what you are selling, and I'm not buying." Remembering that President Obama asked them to just have conversations, Kathy said, "Could we just have a minute?" And just then a woman opened the door of the farmhouse, and she called out to them and said, "If you are going to be at my house, you are going to come in. Supper's on the table." Kathy said it felt like a get out moment, and she was not sure they wanted to go into this house. They were, after all, in rural Iowa, in the middle of nowhere. They didn't know these people, and Kathy was ready to back right out. But Rita jumped right in and said, "Yes, ma'am, we are hungry." And so they went in. They had a wonderful meal of meatloaf and green beans and cornbread. They talked about Cecil and Wilma's kids and their grandkids and the church down the road where they were married. They laughed and told stories. after supper, Cecil walked them out to the road, and then he took both of their hands and said, "Thank you. Thank you for sharing this time and talking with us. But most of all, thank you for listening." And then he said, "Now, I probably won't vote for your guy." So Kathy and Rita turned and waved, walked out of the driveway to head on their way. And then Cecil called after them, "But hey, Kathy, I just might." I just might. Please join us for the intonation.
And now let us join our hearts and minds in a time of prayer and meditation. As we gather in community, we carry with us our pain and our joy. Sometimes sharing these joys and sorrows in community can help. You are now welcome to share your written joys and sorrows by typing them into the chat bar. During the intonation, we will hear David play Communication Breakdown by Roy Orbison and Bill Dees. In this moment of quiet, may our hearts open to hope and healing. May our minds open to peace and possibility. May we hold these joys and sorrows and one another in love and kindness as we strive to provide each other with a sense of comfort, strength, courage, and hope. Not since I was a child have I had a serious argument that I seethed with anger and swore I never wanted to have anything to do with my nemesis ever again. Yet somehow we managed to set aside our disagreements and be friends again. How times have changed. We're living in a society so polarized, so entrenched in our own absoluteness, that communication across the divide is not only difficult, it can be deadly. I grew up with a Midwestern nice sensibility. We were taught to respect authority, be polite, and give people the benefit of the doubt. If I ever talked back to my parents the way children in the average television comedy do, my parents would have disowned me. The flip side was that we never were taught how to respectfully resolve conflicts, especially without giving up our own self-respect. So navigating political and religious minefields isn't something that I'm very practiced at, especially with loved ones. A member of my family and I have had a semi-spoken rule that we would not discuss religion or politics. She and I somehow ended up on opposite ends of the religious and political spectrum. I assumed that she had voted for our current president in 2016, but she had expressed distress with his policy of separating families at the border. Oh, I thought, maybe there's hope for her dropping her support this time. Wasn't the vulgarity and mendacity of the man anathema to our upbringing and her Christian values? Wouldn't she deplore his race baiting? I was curious. I was hopeful. Could we find any common ground and in the process deepen our relationship? So over the phone, when she described having asked someone how he intended to vote, I swallowed hard, held my hopes close, and asked her who she planned to vote for. There was a long pause, and she crossed the line that I had stepped up to. I don't even remember the words she used. I was just so deeply, profoundly disappointed at the sound of his name that I almost groaned. I tried to listen to her reasons, but I just could not respond with anything but, what about this? Or what about that? I lost my ability to hear her. I failed at any kind of dialogue. We ended the conversation civilly, she more calm than I, and she was the first to say, I love you. She was the first to communicate after our phone call. She texted, who are you rooting for in the World Series? I failed in finding a mutual understanding with my relative. I did determine how far apart we are in our perceptions of other people and the world, and that was very difficult. But I know how fruitless it is to try to change her thinking, judging from where she gets her information. So we have returned to where we started, avoiding the sensitive subjects and focusing on what we can comfortably share. The latest family news, baseball, our health, and of course the weather. If that's what we need to do to keep our bridge open, then I accept that. There is so much about her that I continue to learn and can admire. I also know that when she crosses the line into blatant falsehoods and hatefulness, that I am not going to let that go unchallenged. Our first principle is particularly difficult to embrace these days, to recognize the inherent worth and dignity in every human being. I have no problem recognizing my relative's worth and dignity because I know the abundance of her good qualities, her creativity, optimism, and devotion to her family. But carrying our principle to the wider world of acquaintances or strangers whose behavior I deplore, the spewers of hate and violence, I admit I find it overwhelming. I have to remind myself that inherent means that there is potential in that person, even if it isn't apparent. I don't have to accept their warped beliefs or actions, but I should try to see the possibility in them to live up to their worthiness. Being part of this beloved community has helped me keep my eyes on that principle. When I feel that I am failing to see worth in other human beings, I try to remember that I am not alone in this challenge because of all of you. Every time I come to church or join a group of paint branchers, I know that we are united in our embrace of our 7 principles, including the worth and dignity of every human being. I rely on all of us to reinforce that principle, even when it is very difficult, on this day and every day. And now we will hear some special music, Bridge Over Troubled Water, written by Paul Simon and performed by Darren Lovas.
When you're weary, feeling small, when tears are in your eyes, I will dry them all. I'm on your side, oh, when times get rough, and friends just can't be found, like a bridge over troubled water. I will lay me down, like a bridge over troubled water. I will lay me down. When you're down and out, when you're on the street, when evening falls so hard, I will comfort you, I'll take your part. Oh, when darkness comes and pain is all around, like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down, like a bridge over troubled water. I will lay me down. Sail on, silver girl, sail on by. Your time has come to shine. All your dreams are on their way. See how they shine. Oh, if you need a friend, I'm sailing right behind, like a bridge over troubled water. I will ease your mind, like a bridge over troubled water. I will ease your mind.
Oh my, Darren. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. We're finding that we have sometimes go back and check in with people and see if we can play their solo again. We're doing that today with one or two other pieces. And that was really just filled my heart. Thank you. In the story I told, Kathy and Rita took a deep breath and went on into Cecil and Wilma's house for supper, even though they didn't know them, didn't know what it would be like, didn't even know if it would be safe. Yes, ma'am, we are hungry. Rita was ready to reach out, ready for that conversation. The two of them, or at least Rita, imagined it would be worth it and took a risk. And what about Wilma? Wilma invited in these two Black women who were campaigning, knocking on doors. She invited them into her home and offered them a meal, to break bread with strangers, to be hospitable, to share stories. Everyone at the table was stepping into the unknown, reaching across a divide of color, of culture, of assumptions as to who these people were and would they find anything in common. And they did. They told stories about their lives, the people they loved, the kind of lives they led. They had a conversation. They met each other. The essence of humanity is in the connections we can make with each other, in the call to be kind and loving and generous, in giving and in receiving. In meeting each other in rural Iowa, these four people from different cultures, they encountered the human condition. They were strangers and joined each other with some trepidation and perhaps doubt or even suspicion. Cecil said, "I see what you're selling and I ain't buying." And in the next moment, they were finding common ground. Small at first, they were all hungry. As they shared a meal and visited, they found they all had families, children and grandchildren that they loved, stories of community and passion. They lived the story of strangers finding connection across a deep divide. This is a journey, a continuum of what a relationship looks like. It might start with low-risk moments of greeting, and sometimes that's all you can manage. For some of us, we might even start with our own families. My brother and I had not had the best relationship over the years. For most of our lives, our contact has been infrequent and superficial. It was hard for me to create more than a thin connection with him, and we could sometimes go years without a conversation. When I was in clinical pastoral internship, working in a hospital every day, I was trying to understand me and how I responded to things. It was part of the work, part of the training, to observe and improve how I was connecting with the people I was serving in the hospital. And we had to do a lot of self-reflection on that. I began to check in with my three siblings pretty often to learn more about our family dynamics. I'm the youngest of four kids, and I believe we each had a different experience of growing up, almost like we each grew up in different families. For instance, I wondered how we were taught to deal with anger in our family. Were we allowed to be angry? I think I was pretty mean to my older sister. We often argued and yelled and fought, and being the littlest, I would resort to pinching. I pinched hard. I think she actually has scars on her arms from my fingernails. And I don't think she ever fought back. Why not? And I agree with Polly that we didn't really know how to resolve differences. So I would call each of them about once a month with the latest question I was thinking through. I would ask them what they remembered. What was okay in our family? What was not allowed? What were we afraid to talk about? How did mom and dad handle us? It was wonderful. It did so much for me and for deepening my relationships with each of them, but especially my brother. We found ways to connect as adults rather than as siblings or kids, and we found some mutual respect and appreciation for each other. Many of us have people in our families who are cut off. We have stopped communicating with them and they with us. We have severed the relationship for some reason and we just don't deal with them. This often shows up in our family stories across the generations. If I am cut off from my brother, it's very likely that someone in my family history was also cut off. My father may have been cut off from his brother. We repeat these patterns through the generations and through our lives. I know that sometimes we are cut off from someone for self-care. That person may have been abusive or otherwise harmed us. And I'm not asking you to put yourself at risk, but more often, it's not a threatening situation. If it is safe for you, consider reaching out across the divide, even just with a postcard or an email. I hope you can see that we each lose when we write people off, when we fail to see them as worthwhile, whether they are family or strangers or just different from us. We are asked in our first principle to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We recognize that each of us has inherent worth. I think that's the easy part. And maybe I can affirm and promote each person's inherent worth. But the harder ask is for me to believe it is worth my while to treat you as if you have worth, your ideas, your spirit, your being, and to act that way, to listen, to really listen, to be present to you in the moment. We have to find a way to suspend our own self-righteousness, our considered knowledge, our well-won opinions, if we are to meet someone where they are, and form the possibility of them meeting me where I am. It is not enough to know that each of us has worth. It is imperative that we consider it worthwhile for me to engage in that moment of relationship building. We each have a role to play. We are not complete without this other person, without the other parts of our family, without the other parts of this country, this world. We are diminished without each of us. Honoring the inherent worth and dignity is our first principle, and it sounds easy. Why do we even need to name it? Because it is so hard to do. We are human. We live our lives by seeing patterns and making decisions based on those patterns. Judgments about our safety, about our likelihood of finding common stories, about this person's kindness or intelligence, or whether we might find them interesting. We have to override our own human and protective nature to open ourselves to reaching out to new people, new situations. We're different, each having a different set of judgments that we make and different barriers to the work of reaching out. But we all carry some of this as human nature. It helps to keep us safe, but all too often it limits the opportunity to connect across the divide. May we find ways this week to connect with someone, a neighbor, a coworker, a family member, even during COVID. May we seek just to connect, to have a conversation, to find places of common ground, maybe some places of meaning. With practice as we work to remember and to act on the inherent worth of every person, if we bring that thought to the forefront of our minds as we seek yet another conversation, we will be transformed. We each will be transformed. May it be so. Please join in singing our hymn number 1023, Building Bridges, and as performed by Renee Katz.
Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony.
It's always a joy to hear Renee's voice. Thank you, Renee. The mission of this church carries on in these uncertain times and is more important than ever. We're so grateful to have the financial support of our members and friends. Please give as generously as you are able. Phil will now post the information for giving in the chat window. This information can also be found in the online order of service. Our offertory music will be Listen Before I Go by Billie Eilish and Phineas O'Connell.
Thank you, David. That was beautiful. Thank you for being with us today for this worship service as we head into week of election, of wondering how this will go, hoping people will be able to vote, that votes will all be counted, being mindful of risk, of possibility. We are going to show next a video of our own Chalice dancers dancing and singing Spirit of Life. It was recorded in 2009. I want you to just enjoy the dance and the music and the faces that we see in this video. And then at the end of it, we will go ahead as a congregation and sing Fuente de Amor, Spirit of Life. So we'll start with the video, and then David will play the music for us to sing ourselves.
Our worship service has ended. I extinguish the chalice. Go in peace.